Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, January 17th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. We continue our position preview series, which began with the previous episode. We started with shortstops today. We move over to second base, staying in the middle infield, digging through a position that has some depth, but the quality of those players tails off considerably once you get out past that pick 200, pick 250 marker. So as we do for all these episodes, we're going to look at NFBC ADP as a guide for where these players are going. We're looking at the last 7 days, all formats. So if you hear a number and it doesn't make sense, that's how we came up with that number. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to like this video. Drop us a comment if you have a question or if you just enjoyed something we said. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and also leave us a nice rating and review if you're listening to the podcast version of the show. We really appreciate it if you did that. So, I know we do not have a lot of extra time based on how long the shortstop preview was. Let's get right to it. Let's talk about the tier 1 options at second base, which now includes Mookie Betts again. I feel like we've traveled back in time, and my argument would be that Mookie Betts is more valuable at second base to us as fantasy players. He's still eligible in the outfield, of course, since he played a little bit more out there in 2023. But according to Dave Roberts at the winter meetings this year, Mookie's the everyday second baseman for this Dodgers team now. What he did at the plate in 2023 was pretty ridiculous. It was the second best barrel rate of his career. The entire hitting profile on his StatCast page went red. And it looked like in 2022, there were some signs of normal aging in there, right? It was, okay, Mookie Betts is, getting into that point in his
strikeout rate a little bit up.
Yeah, he's not Superman anymore. No, he's still Superman, which is just crazy. So it's interesting that the first skill that appears to be fading is actually the speed. Stolen bases are the thing that have kind of tapered off in recent years, but he's still getting 10 plus every year. But this is really an ultimate average power and run production play, especially with the quality of the lineup around him right now in Los Angeles.
Yeah, kudos to him. Going up to drive line and doing bat speed, work at 31 when, even a bad season for you was like a, near MVP season, 2022, like still like near a 7-win season. And that bat speed work, I think, helped. He had the best max exit velo he'd had since 2018 in Boston. And so, reverse some of that aging, had the second best barrel rate of his career, like you said. So it's like, the best or second best hard hit rate. Like, you take a guy that has amazing contact ability, amazing sense of the plate, and some nascent power, doesn't hit 50% of his balls on the ground. And this is the 99.9th percentile outcome for the type of player like that. Mm-hmm. But it is why I am forever interested in guys in the minor leagues that walk 12% of the time and strike out, 14% of the time or whatever, and have non-zero power. It's the Mookie Betts that I'm always chasing.
So it's a lofty ceiling, but it's fun when it actually happens. The overall appeal here, Mookie's an early first rounder. Just looking at the last 7 days, he's going between pick 2 and pick 6. So you got to have a spot up near the front of the draft order if you want him. You're kind of considering him over the likes of Julio Rodriguez or Bobby Witt Jr. or Corbin Carroll. You're taking him over Spencer Strider if you want him in that part of the draft.
It's a little bit like Soto, where like you think you're going to get 10 stolen bases. It's going to be at the top of the lineup, have great OBP. So he should have great runs on RBI in a great lineup. But unlike Soto, has run better batting averages and has recently, come into his power. So, I'm taking him well over Soto.
Interesting that Steamer's got him losing 6 homers compared to his 39 that he hit last season, and a decent amount of batting average. He hit 307 last year. Steamer's got him at 279. Runs and RBIs down a little bit too. It's almost like impossible to see a projection for what Betts did last year: 126 runs and 107 RBIs. So basically, a little bit of everything ticking down.
There's some aging in there, even though 294 career average. 316 BABIP last year, 305 for his career. I think you could buy the projection, right? And hope there's actually a little bit less aging in there, a little bit like the Paul Goldschmidt or Nolan Arenado early 30s, where they were supposed to get worse than they did.
got a little bit of a gap after Mookie at this position before you get to Ozzie Albies and Marcus Semien. That's more of a toss-up head-to-head. With Albies, I think it's kind of strange. It's a little bit like the Mookie profile, lower barrel rates, and I don't think he's going to age nearly as well as Mookie has because he's already a horrible defender at second base. He's got near league worst arm strength.
Does not have the same approach at the plate, you know.
He's 54th percentile in sprint speed, and Ozzie Albies isn't old. So I feel like I'm saying only bad things about someone who goes inside the top 30. It's not entirely fair because I think we saw that the skills we saw back in 2021, those are core skills that Albies has. He got to 30 home runs again, got to 33, in fact. Stolen base total dropped slightly with the full season. A little surprising given the new rules. He was 13 for 14, but that sprint speed sort of explains why maybe 20 plus year over year just isn't going to happen for him, even though he just turned 27 10 days ago. Like Ozzie Albies, one of those guys, because he got called up so young, you'd expect to see a 30 in the age column, and he's still kind of in that peak window.
Yeah, I wouldn't call for any sort of chase rate related early decline yet. I do think that's coming at some point. And so it is something to think about in dynasty leagues. There might be an ideal time to trade Albies. You know, maybe not this year because he still has that 2022 that might be dragging his price, you know, his what he can bring you back in trade down a little bit. Where somebody says, oh, you know, 2 out of the last 4 years he's been kind of injured. You know, so, you know, I don't know if I want to. What if he's an oft injured guy? What if he's going to head into his injury phase? But if he has a big year this year, at the trade deadline this year might be the ideal time to trade him in dynasty leagues. I mean, you'd be trading him, you know, at his peak, but you'd be, you know, getting away from any potential early disaster when it comes to when you chase outside the plate after 30, your ability to make contact on those pitches goes down precipitously. And so you could see him heading into 22, 23, 24% strikeout rates in his early 30s. And I think if he does that, he's not going to be the same player because he's going to walk 6% of the time, strike out 24% of the time, not steal that many bases, and maybe start running out 240s.
Right.
In terms of batting average. He's never been a good BABIP guy. And the last thing that is a flaw is that he's much better from the right side than he is from the left side. And so that makes him a bit of is that right? Did I get that one right?
Better from the left side than the right side, you said, right?
Better from the right side than the left side. He's better against lefties for his career. I mean, the split's pretty big. He's 98 WRC plus against righties, 145 against lefties. So some of this is just murdering lefties. That's neither here nor there. Like I said, I'm with you. I think he's the second best second baseman this year. I think it's too early to sort of call all these things into play, but I did want to bring it up in a sort of dynasty context that these things do matter a little bit in terms of his long-term projection.
And I've wondered too if we do see some OBP slippage again, even with the power and the speed that he brings, if that starts to hurt where he's placed in a loaded Atlanta lineup, that could also drag things down a little bit.
I think there's a split on his batting order.
Yeah, so what happened last season from about June 15th on, he just locked in that number 2 spot. There was one game where he hit third.
But he was 6th against righties early in the season.
Right. So it's there. It's a really small crack in the foundation for a player that's been really good. And the other part of the appeal with Ozzie Albies, much like the appeal with Marcus Semien, is that he is a max volume player. Like they run him out there every single day.
Run everybody out there.
That core, Acuna, Olsen, Riley, Albies, those guys play a ton. So you have that sort of
look at Semien, dude. Starting in 2018, 703, 747. 2020, 2021, 724, 2022, 724, 2023, 753 plate appearances from Marcus Semien. Has there ever been anybody who posts so much? I mean, this guy plays every day. It almost feels like he's playing extra games. Like you kind of want to look in there and be like, did he play 165? You know what I mean? Like how is he getting to 753? It's amazing. I mean, top of the lineup, good lineup every day. Marcus Semien, 33 years old. Like is there going to be a sort of Roosters? What is it called?
I don't know where you're going with that one.
The thing where the chickens come home to roost or whatever. Like, is there just going to be a year where he has like 200 plate appearances and is hurt all year?
I mean, something could befall him at any point. It's just the hazard of being out there every day. The age-related durability questions are fair to ask because so few middle infielders, second basemen in particular, aged well as they move as far past 30 as Marcus Semien is. Nobody in the league has more plate appearances the last 3 seasons. It's 2,201 plate appearances for Marcus Semien.
Much.
It's only 10 guys in the league that have 2,000.
Yeah, is he like 150, 200 above second place?
Freddie Freeman's got a lot too.
Okay.
Freddie Freeman, I think, was second when I looked it up. But
I will say that I was trying to think of research. There is some research about projecting injury and projecting plate appearances. And that research suggests that the most important thing is age. So at some point, it won't matter how much he's played before. He's just older. But that the other most important things are how many plate appearances did you get last year? How many plate appearances did you get the year before? And how many plate appearances did you get the year before that? So in terms of projecting his playing time going forward, you might want to put a 7 in front of it for another year, which is not what projection systems do. And so if there is any upside in his projection, which is a 265 batting average, 27 homers, and 16 stolen bases for Marcus Semien, if there's any upside, it's that the projection is only for 695 plate appearances, and he could beat that by another 30 to 40. So I don't know if I'd bet on that. But in terms of like the type of player he is, I think what's amazing is how much he's gotten out of the raw tools. I mean, in terms of max EV, he's average in the big leagues, and yet he turns out, over the last 4 full seasons, he's been a guy who averages like 32 homers a year. And then, in terms of barrel rates, it's not below average in terms of the whole league, but he's like below average for like starters who have power. You know what I mean? It's, last year's 6.5% barrel rate, but he's a little bit like Isaac Paredes and Alex Bregman, where when he hits a ball hard, he hits it in the air, 47% fly ball rate, and he pulls it. And that pull percent was 50% last year. So if you want to look at Isaac Paredes, who I don't know if he's on this rundown, he's the third baseman now.
Yeah, he didn't make this rundown.
Yeah. Still going off the rundown, just real quick, if you want to think about Isaac Paredes and whether or not he can do it year in and year out, Marcus Semien's been doing it for 5 years.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it's something that we need to probably explore in greater detail, beyond the handful of extreme players that have this approach, because what I think happens is there's a lot of groupthink about barrel rate in particular. Oh, the barrel rate's low, I don't want this player. And guys are slight bargains or even significant bargains. Semien goes so early that you're not getting a deal, but he goes where he should go based on what he does. The other part of his profile that I think is kind of interesting, he's got an 85th percentile sprint speed at this age, which is really impressive. And he was really efficient as a base stealer last year. He was 14 for 17. He could have run a lot more. I mean, you have a 348 OBP and you get 753 plate appearances. You have a lot more than 17 chances to steal bases. But what I wonder about is if the Rangers are a team that don't really want to run as much as others, because they were 4th from the bottom in stolen bases as a team. They only stole 79 bases. Some of it's personnel you have.
Lineup. Like, you don't want to take the bat out of the next guy's hand. Like, there was like 1 or 2 players on that team, and even who are the empty spots in that lineup? The empty quote unquote spots are Jonah Heim and Leody Taveras, right? It's like, I don't know. Those guys are pretty good.
Yeah, Leote, 14 bags last year, 14 for 18. That's a guy that I would have thought would have run even more. I mean, 70 grade speed for Leote Taveras. So
Real quick, just back to that barrel rate discussion, there is a relationship between pulling and launch angle. And so what happens is the more you pull the ball, the more you hit into the ground. So these players that have high pull rates and high fly ball rates are going against that trend. And if they've demonstrated it for a year or two, like, I'm willing to believe in it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, circling back to the Semien Albies part of this conversation, you're looking at these two guys against the likes of Francisco Lindor, who we talked about yesterday. Rafael Devers goes in the same range. Pete Alonso on the other corner. A couple of really good starters with Gossman, Zack Wheeler, Vlad Jr. That's a pretty nice group of players overall. I'm curious if you're investing early in second base or if you're going to kind of kick it down the road in most cases, given those alternatives.
I think the way it's worked for me is that I'm kicking it down the road. And the reason why, I think we talked a little bit in the starting pitcher profile and starting pitcher preview yesterday, that sometimes not the starting pitcher, sorry, the shortstops, that with the shortstops, it looked like there was like, get your guy and then wait. You know, there was kind of like the only two guys that were kind of in the middle were like McLean and I forget who it was.
Horner was in there, I think, too.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the middle ground. And then it's just like, okay, get Carlos Correa late or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there was a real stratification. With second base, I see more of a gradual decline. So as an example, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 second basemen that are around $10 in value. And so, yes, Semien and Albies and Jose Altuve, we're talking about in a second, they're like $25 guys. But what if I can get a $25 shortstop and do better with a middle level second baseman? Much easier get a $10 second baseman. That's better than getting a $25 second baseman and then finding myself with Carlos Correa at the end, who we like, but probably we like some of the middle second baseman better.
Yeah, so I guess that would suggest that you see Correa as more of a middle infielder than your shortstop, where you're looking for $12 to $15 worth of value from that MI spot. And
I mean, he's I just using him sort of as a last acceptable shortstop in a way, but he's right on the line. Yeah, I would rather have him as an MI. But Jose Altuve, I think, is just a really interesting guy to put in this group because in terms of projections, like he's the other $25 guy. And in fact, his projection comes out for like $1.20 more than Marcus Semien's. And he's aging a little bit more like you'd expect an older guy to age. It doesn't look the same as Marcus Semien. At 33, we've got... in 2018, 2019, we had 2 seasons where he didn't make 600 plate appearances. 2020 was pretty healthy, but not a great season. One of his worst seasons, in fact, a replacement level season. 2021 was a good number, 678 plate appearances, but then Altuve settled in with 604 and 410 last year. Although it was a broken hand from the WBC, which is not a risk on the table. I just... his projections that give him this money are at 680 plate appearances. And my personal in the head projection is closer to, let's give him 600, let's bake in an IL appearance or two. And if you put him down to 600, then Altuve is going to give you, 22 homers and, 13, 14 stolen bases, and nowhere near the same runs and RBIs as Semien. So Semien's clearly the choice over Altuve, I think.
Altuve, who's 14 for 16 as a base stealer last year, was just 90 games. So if you say he's going to play a 140, 145, if he kept running at the same rate because he gets on base a ton, 20 bags would still be there just based on what he did with the new rules. But that's
a good call.
It's waning speed. It's a 37th percentile sprint speed. So you do wonder if that's kind of closer to a ceiling. 15 might be more in line with what he's likely to do given his age and given that lost skill. everything on the surface looked pretty good. I mean, it was 311, 393, 522, 17 homers with those bags, 8.3% barrel rate.
He's a Bregman, Semien guy in terms of high pull, high fly ball. Although last year, 48% ground ball. So, how's that approach gonna age?
He's done that before too, though. We've seen upper 40% ground ball rates. It's a bit of a mystery, and he could be a free agent for the first time ever this time next year. These are the final year of that extension that he signed. I think Altuve is a question of, would you rather just bail a year early and be wrong to say, oh yeah, he was still good for another year, as opposed to taking him in the third round and being kind of right about your worries? I mean, I think that's
I'm a little bit more on the be wrong, a year early side, especially since, like I said, I think there's some middle guys I like. Is he a Hall of Famer?
Probably.
Yeah. I wonder how much he has left. But a 307, 364, 471 line, 53 WAR for his career. I would say he's probably around the average Hall of Fame second baseman right now. So, if he plays another 2 to 3 years and gets closer to 250 homers, gets over 300 stolen bases, and keeps that slash line high, yeah, I could see him. Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit weird because of how the beginning of his career started, how different a player he was for the first 5 years of his career. He was a guy who didn't have any pop and just ran a lot.
Yeah, and he's got almost a full season's worth of plate appearances in the postseason because the Astros are always there. 476 career playoff appearances at the plate. 273, 345, 10, 27 homers.
Another 27 homers. You got to add those in.
I think he gets in.
Yeah.
Based on what he's done so far, and with the assumption that he'll play 3 or 4 more years at a reasonably high level. So my takeaway on Altuve is probably similar to yours. I'd see Bo Bichette sitting there right next to him. I prefer Bo for this year. I think you could look at some of the other pitchers that go in this range, like Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I'd rather have Yamamoto than Altuve because I like the way this position goes, kind of the middle tier of this group. I think we might be split on the next player. And there's a bit of an ADP gap because we talked about Nico Horner and Matt McClain yesterday. Those guys kind of go between Altuve and Ha-Seong Kim. And he's a good player, one that really flourished with the new stolen base rules. 38 steals was actually his career best, including his time in the KBO. And there have been some whispers the Padres might trade him. He does a lot of his damage in the air by pulling fly balls. Makes sense. Defensive value buys him a ton of playing time in nearly any situation. I don't think you have to worry about Kim losing much. If he did lose some playing time, it'd probably be in same-handed pitching. Maybe the lineup position could fluctuate if the OBP kind of trends back towards his 3-year level. But what he did last season came with a career best 12% walk rate. So I'm just curious if you're in on the career year from Kim, if you think he's still part of the plan for the Padres this year. He does offer a lot of versatility, being second base, shortstop, and third base eligible.
Yeah, there are rumors that he could be traded, and he's probably the number one tradable asset for the Padres. But I almost assume that if he is traded, that, it might be for like salary relief, like pairing him with Cronenworth or something. It's not totally clear to me. Otherwise, what they need right now is like starting pitching in the major leagues. And, or I guess they could trade him for a slugging corner outfielder. But do you see that happening? I mean, you look at this Padres team, like, I don't know. What do you think that the next move is, just from a, like, we want to be competitive going forward this year and we don't have any money left? Like right now it's Cal Mitchell and Ornelas in left field and Azokar in center.
I don't think trading Kim is the answer. I mean, it's like a $7 million player. That's going to fix everything. You're right about getting away from the Cronenworth contract, how that could be kind of one way to get there. But I think they also want to stay competitive while they pare things down. And I think Kim is one of those guys that keeps you competitive. He's just a solid all-around player with what he can bring to the
And
table.
Machado is not going to be able to play third to start the season, I don't think. I mean, you'd rather have Kim and Cronenworth than be playing a lot of Guy Rosario, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the questions I have about Kim basically come down to the quality of the contact that he makes. 26.2% hard hit rate, only a 4.3% barrel rate. We see this kind of profile a lot on guys that run and kind of spray the ball around effectively. I don't know how repeatable it is, man. Like I'd rather, it's not just Kim. I'd rather try and find this profile 50, 75, 100 picks later, because I think this profile comes back around in the player pool year over year at a more discounted price. I never like paying full freight for this combination of skills in the midst of a career season.
I don't disagree fully. Part of why he ended up on my team in the draft we're having, which is maybe why you anticipate more of a disagreement, was multi-eligibility. And I think it's hard to evaluate multi-eligibility correctly in the draft and hold format. And in fact, I think you could add as much as $1 for every extra eligibility for players. And so, like projection has him, for $12, and that puts him comfortably below where he's being taken. But for me in that draft, he gave me so many options. I've switched his position in my roster board like 4 times because he's second base, shortstop, and third base, and that's just hugely valuable in a draft and hold format. In a regular format, one nice thing is if you have a short bench, if you have Ha-Seong Kim on your team, I think, going into, like I've said this before, going into a free agent season, I think he's going to post. I think he's going to be on the field every day. And so if you have Ha-Seong Kim on your team, you may not need to have many people on your bench covering those positions. You can have sort of a one-man MICI, that can play anywhere. And I think that's worth something. I don't know if it's worth exactly where his draft position is. And the last bit for me is that I do think projections are struggling a little bit with the stolen base environment. I don't see a guy going into his free agent season, who still runs well and gets on base well and is 28. I don't see him going from 38 stolen bases to 26. So my, back of the napkin projection for Ha-Seong Kim is something like 250, 15, 40. Like I think he could steal more. And so I'm not sure that specific collection of skills is super available later. There are guys who might steal those bags and have fewer homers, but non-zero power, which I think he's demonstrated 2 years in a row where, yes, despite the poor barrel rates, despite the poor max EVs, despite the poor hard hit rate, he's going to run into 12 to 15 a year. It's just going to be, those are going to be the days he gets a pitch to hit, you know what I mean? And he drives it. So if I just want 12 to 15 homers, 330 OBP and 40 stolen bases, I think that's all there for me.
See, I'm wondering if there's some guys coming up in the next tier that do basically the same thing at a slightly lower price. And I think that's where some of my hesitation is with Kim. Other player in this tier is Gleyber Torres. He's entering his walk year, now showing the best strikeout rate of his career and improved patience. The 38 home runs we saw a few years ago when he hit like 36 of them against the Orioles, that might be out of reach. But he's good at everything, still plays half of his games in a great hitter's park, and probably like an ideal outcome at second base in terms of getting a nice floor with the possibility of some more in average or homers. Like I think there could be one more gear compared to the previous season from Torres. I think the price is really good. It's not quite the extreme bargain that we talked about in the shortstop preview with Willy Adames, but I do think it's a relative bargain and just a player you're going to be pretty happy with when the dust clears at the end of 2024.
100%. I think there's a really interesting thing that happens here. So what are your ADP numbers for Kim, Torres, Stott, Giménez, and Marte? Are they all like around 100?
Yeah, Kim's like 85. Torres is like 90, 95-ish. Stott's like 10 picks after that. Giménez is right in the same range. And then There was
Ketel
one more. Marte is like 20 picks later than that.
So this is a group that you'll have on your board, right? Kim, Torres, Stott, Giménez, Marte will all be sitting there on your board when you come, past a certain point in your draft, and you're like, what's fascinating to me is that Torres, Giménez, and Marte have $20 projections, right? So that's above Nico Horner, who goes above him. That's above Matt McLean. And it's above Ha-Seong Kim, So you can wait through. This is the beginning of the middle that I'm talking about. Like, these are $20 players that are going around ADP 100. And you could put them all on your list and wait if you just want to get the most value. Or you can play, sort of, do I want a little bit more steals? Do I want a little bit more power with the Torres Giménez? You know what I mean? But for me, Torres, Giménez, and Ketel Marte are values. They have demonstrated, Giménez has demonstrated plus speed. At the very least, I think he can do a Ha-Seong Kim package, and you could at least get yourself, maybe a round's worth of value by waiting between Kim and Giménez. And then Torres, I think, is the best all-around guy of the group, because I do think he's going to hit 25 and steal 15. And just generally due to last year, also going into free agent year. So maybe there'll be a little bonus somewhere. And just generally, I think that's a great place to shop. The one guy I don't like in this group is Bryson Stott. And I just find it a very soft sort of selection of skills. I've talked to him about his approach, and he very much just wants to kind of line drive it, put the ball in play, spray it around. I don't think there's any more power coming. And, I guess it's a Ha-Seong Kim type package where I don't know why I'm saying, he stole 31 and he's going to steal fewer next year. But I do also think the Phillies don't need him to steal bases. It's a really good lineup. That's a big slugging lineup. And just generally, I feel like he could get more out of what he does if he tried to hit for more power. I'm not sure of that with Kim. And I'm just worried about, like, what if the BABIP regression comes for Stott a little bit? And what if he's a 260 hitter next year with 15 homers, 25 stolen bases? It just seems like, a little bit cheaper than Ha-Seong Kim, but a little bit worse.
I think it's really, really similar. I think that's exactly why I'm okay with Stott. Like, if you believe in Kim, I can't really find any different warts with Stott. I think he handled same-handed pitching a little better than I expected him to, and he's league average against righties. He's got everything you would need for him to continue playing a ton. He's a great defender. That's there. It is interesting.
Not saving a lot. I mean, you're saving one round of picks.
20 picks. I think the way I would think about it is, if Bryson Stott, even is not a target for me, if I'm in that situation that you were in, where I feel like I need some bags and this is the place to get it, someone else gets Kim, I think Stott's an okay replacement. I actually think Giménez is too, though.
Giménez is somebody, that I had on my board for a long time. I think that I love buying low on him.
The thing about Giménez that gives me a little bit of pause is he chases a lot of pitches outside the zone. 42.7% O swing
He's still
percentage.
25. I mean, I don't think it's going to come home to roost just yet.
He did that when he was good. A lot of similarities to Stott, so it totally makes sense. The projections lump them together. The market lumps them together. I think with Stott, maybe I believe there's a little more consistency, in part because of the supporting cast. I just like the guys hitting around him in Philly more than I like the guys hitting around Giménez in Cleveland. And
I like Giménez's batted ball stats a little bit better, though.
Man, the hard hit rate, it jumped in 22 for Giménez, and it didn't stick. And I'm wondering if there was maybe an injury that was underreported or something else going on there. I mean, given his age, entirely possible that he gets
at least he pulls the ball. Like, he can pull it for power. Like, I'm taking Giménez's home run total over Stott's.
Okay, but they're going to be reasonably close. It might be a case where Stott gets you a few more bags, Giménez gets you a few more homers. It's a decent place to shop overall. Ketel Marte, I think it's kind of like the Gleyber profile, maybe with a little more average upside already in his past, but less speed at the present. So you give him a few bags, you might get a few more points in average.
I'm a little worried about the sort of on again, off again nature of his injury history.
A lot of injuries. Yeah, I think that's the one thing that with Marte kind of rises above some of the other players in this cluster. You give him a lower health grade than almost anybody else we talked about so far.
And his projection that gives him this $20 value is with a 676 plate appearance projection, which he's never done. Yeah, okay. And I would also just note that in my 12-teamer, I shopped Ketel Marte pretty hard last year and got no bites. So I would circle that projection and probably take a few dollars off of it. But what's interesting is there's still a little bit of a cliff there. There are no other $20 players by Steamer. And in fact, if you took $4 off the Ketel Marte projection and made him a $16 player, the only other player that's above $15 on Steamer at second base is Luis Arraez. So, you could just circle Luis Arraez and Ketel Marte and wait till pick 140 and just take one of those guys there. I mean, that's not quite the same package, but you would be getting an undervalued second baseman.
So I'm really curious to know if Zack Gelof is today's equivalent of Matt McLain. I mean, you look back at his minor league profile, I think there was more consistent strikeout rate issues with Gelof, whereas McLain, we talked about the up and down a little bit on yesterday's show. Gelof ran a lot more than he did at Double-A with the bump up to Triple-A and the big leagues this season. And I wonder if health was a factor in that. If I remember correctly, I think it was a shoulder injury for Gelof in the minors 2 years ago. You get a bad shoulder, you're probably not trying to dive head first into second base. So I think that sort of
explains maybe some of the up and down nature of his ISOs too. I mean,
yes,
that 2022 Double-A, that was his worst ISO. If you eliminate that, he's had 200 plus ISOs everywhere. He hits the ball hard.
So there's sometimes where I wish Steamer was a person and not just the projection, and we could like go sit down at the brewery with Steamer and be like, so buddy, like, why are you projecting the lowest average that Gelof has ever had anywhere? Like, why are you projecting that? Just tell me why. He doesn't have a chase problem, and I don't think he has a problem with velo. 10 of his 14 homers he hit with Oakland were on fastballs. So he's probably going to see more breaking and off-speed pitches this year. We'll see if he can adjust. Unlike McLain, the home park doesn't help. It hurts, right? Yeah. The supporting cast doesn't help. It hurts. So all the things you could look at for McLain and say, even I'm not sure about this. This is a good situation that he's in. Let's round up. Let's keep rounding up. With Gelof, I feel like you kind of have to like check yourself a little bit. But the underlying skills are good. It's an 11.1% barrel rate. It's a 91st percentile sprint speed. So the power and speed should be there, even if there might be a little more average OBP risk in the short term. Maybe that's what the projections are warning us about. Maybe that's what our friend Steamer would say if we had a nice beer with Steamer. Steamer would say, look,
Steamer would
I'm
say,
saving you from yourself.
Minor league BABIPs aren't, super great. They're super full of noise. And his 330 major league BABIP came in 300 plate appearances. And so I'm just going to have to regress that super hard towards league average. And so the 306 BABIP, I think, is probably what's low. And so I think he can manage the 240, 245 at least. We also had a conversation about how his max EV is lowish, 1085, and lower than his teammate Tyler Soderstrom's. We actually had this conversation about his teammate and him. It was kind of I was like I didn't mean it was like one of those questions that I was trying to ask and I didn't mean to ask it that way, and then when it was coming out I was like, oh my god, what are you saying? But I basically asked him like, Tyler Soderstrom hits the ball harder than you, but you've had much more success. like what's going on with that? And he gave me an answer about how he just thinks, and he's basically, he believes, I guess in hard hit rate over max EV, because he was like, if I can get to 102s and 105s a lot, why do I need to try and hit at 120? He said, when I try and hit at 120, it's an out of control swing. That's an answer from the perspective of a player, right? Like that makes sense from the player's perspective. But from an analyst's perspective, what we're getting from max EV is, I think, bat speed, like peak bat speed, right? So he doesn't have Stantonian peak bat speed, but maybe he has enough bat speed for the major leagues. There's definitely a split within people who coach hitters where some people think more bat speed is better no matter what. And other people think, well, there's a correlation, or inverse correlation between bat speed and swing and miss in the zone. So there might just be an acceptable amount of bat speed that you need to have to be in the big leagues. So that there's a split there. And Gelof is kind of in the middle of it, where somebody might say, well, you need to swing harder. Other people might say, well, you're already swinging. You already have a 27% strikeout rate. Like you're doing the right thing for your skill set.
I mean, this might be oversimplifying it by a mile, but wouldn't the measurement essentially be enough bat speed to hit big league fastballs?
Mm-hmm.
And then can you look at splits against fastballs and say, yep, he's got it. He's got enough. Because if you think about the max EV problem, Marcus Semien had a 108.6 last year as his max, and he had 566 batted ball events. He had probably more batted ball events than anybody because of the playing time. So if Gelof has the same max EV as Marcus Semien and a barrel rate that's 5 percentage points higher, like that, what's the problem? Like, I guess I don't.
He hits more
know.
ground balls than Semien, but yeah,
for now, right.
And then to add a scouting component, I saw a lot of him. It's exciting. He's an all fields guy. He hits the ball hard to all fields, and it seems to be he has a little bit of take the ball where it's pitched ability, and I kind of think he's got it with the capital I. You can run into problems. You can run into problems. I mean, how many? Just think back on yourself of how many kids you saw that you thought had it with a capital I, and it didn't turn out that way. So I tend not to rely on that, but my internal scout says this guy's real.
Okay, so can we even come close to justifying a 70 pick ADP difference between Matt McLain and Zack Gelof as of right now? Because I can't.
Yeah, it's interesting. Steamer says $17 for McLain and $10 for Gelof.
Yeah, I don't think the gap's
the
that
batting
wide.
Average, the park, the batting average, the team though too. I mean, look at that. Steamer says 622 plate appearances, 76 runs, and 67 RBI from a guy who's probably going to be the 2-hitter.
I do still think this lineup is disgusting.
It's still bad. It's a bad lineup.
It's still bad. There's young guys that can keep getting better. I say this is gross, even as someone who actually likes some of these guys. I think Langoliers will be better this year. I think Soderstrom will take a step. I like Jordan Diaz more than most people because he doesn't play defense for the team that I don't own. Like, it doesn't matter to me that his defense isn't good. Lawrence Butler's kind of interesting too. So yeah, maybe our A's preview will be a little more exciting this year than it would have been a year ago once we get there. But
it's one of those things that's not easy to see when you're like in the draft and you're like, oh man, homers and speed, I'll just take Gelof later. But you know, you might be seeding 30 runs and RBI combined between the two.
I do think it's interesting though, because I think Gelof is not getting days off. He's an everyday player, whereas most of the guys that start to come after him in these next couple of tiers could be in danger of losing even small shares of playing time. I think that would even apply Thairo Estrada. Thairo Estrada, because of the way the Giants mix and match, I don't think he gets 100% playing time. I just don't think that exists for him. So I think that's sort of a separator. Gelof versus Estrada, like Estrada's counting stats might lag for that reason, even though Gelof plays more. And I think you could look at Gelof and say these are more interesting tools.
The only reason that I push back on that at all is that Estrada was elite defensively at second base, and the team seems to have decided that Marco Luciano is going to get the first shot at shortstop. We're a little far out from opening day, and there's still a fair amount of trading and free agents that need to be sorted. So maybe that won't happen. But I think third base, first base, DH, corner outfield, that's where they're going to move a lot of guys. And I think they're trying to move towards having some everyday components. And I think if you look at this lineup, you say Estrada, Luciano, and Lee. up the middle, young, defense is there. That's a reason to put them in every day, and we can play all our games around that. There's some fan pressure even to do something like this. Like there are think pieces and people on the radio and like, I don't even want to make it seem like it's just people in the media, because I have lots of Giants friends. My family, my dad, I walk around in the concourse. I hear it all the time. I think there's a legitimate, can you give us some people to believe in, to buy jerseys of? Can you put somebody in the lineup every day? And so, maybe it'll be Estrada, Luciano, and Lee this year.
So 3 titles in 5 years buys you about 5 to 7 years of people being happy before they start to get a little cranky about what you're doing with the roster. That's good to know.
I mean, it's so funny. They had 107 wins. It's the most in franchise history, or at least in San Francisco history. And that bought their manager 2 years.
Last one from this tier, Luis Arraez. He's a unicorn, and it's kind of a rare opportunity to recoup a lot of batting average in the middle rounds. There's not really guys like him that play this much, that could do this much in the category. Lineup placement makes him pretty reasonable, I think, in the runs and RBI department, and maybe a healthier supporting cast could give him a bump. By the auction calculator, he was the 38th best hitter in a 5x5 league in 2023. Steamer projects him to be about 30 spots lower than that going into 2024. I think he's still a little bit discounted relative to his overall value in 5x5 because of the homer and steal situation. I just don't think there's another level for the power or the speed for Arraez. I think it's average, it's runs, and it's RBIs. And that's most of what it is.
Yeah. I have him in an honor league, and I don't know what to do with myself. Last year I had the best batting average in our league, and I was 20 homers short and 20 stolen bases short of where I wanted to be. And it's like kind of pretty easy to look at that one lineup spot and be like, are you giving me good stuff and hurting me in other places? Because maybe it's better for me to just have a 280 guy that hits 30 homers in that spot and not be falling behind in homers. So, I have a hard time valuing him. I will just point out that, relative to his draft position, he's probably the best steamer value in this group.
It's almost like you have to build the rest of the roster, or at least a couple other spots around him in a way that makes it make sense to not lag in those other categories.
And we just had one off air before I got up here. A combination with Jack Sawinski. You smushed Luis Arraez and Jack Sawinski together, and basically come out the other end with 280 hitters with 20 homers and 10 steals. I mean, it sounds funny because those are kind of averagers fantasy players, but you might not have paid that much.
That's the key. Is that this used to happen a few years ago. I think it was something Todd Zola talked about me on the RotoWire show. It was like, take Joey Gallo, who at the time was still with the Rangers, popping 40 homers, had the low average, but good runs, good RBIs, and even some steals when steals were a little harder to get. Put him with DJ LeMahieu.
Yeah,
and those two guys Frankenstein together around, I think at the time, maybe like pick 75, pick 90, something in that range. You'd end up with 2 earlier round players with those roster spots.
This is even cheaper.
This is cheaper. And I think with it being cheaper, I'm more likely to entertain it. I think inside the top 100, the Frankenstein player approach was something I was a little bit less interested in because it just felt like the price was too steep. And then if one of those guys got hurt, that it still kind of screwed things up in the same way. If you put too much categorical weight into a player, same kind of thing. But, I don't know. I it's been done, but I think cheaper is always better when you're trying to get something out of.
When you're trying to be sneaky.
Yes, very much so. There's Tommy Edman in the 150 to 200 range ADP wise. He's alone. We talked about him a little bit yesterday. So we're going to kind of jump over him and make the next tier from like pick 200 to pick 300. So it's a big group. It runs from Nolan Gorman all the way down to his teammate, Brendan Donovan. And there's probably about 10 players, maybe 11 players in this group. There's some potential pitfalls here. There are some potential sleepers here. And I think Nolan Gorman could still be really, really good. He has the best barrel rate at the second base position, 17.8%, minimum 100 batted ball events. So if someone played a little less and did better, my apologies. But I think you have to ask yourself, can Gorman shake off lost playing time against lefties? Can he work his way into a level of production where the Cardinals say between second base and DH, you're an everyday guy or much closer to an everyday guy? The small samples do offer some hope. He struck out less in his limited chances against lefties last year.
He was great against lefties. Don't ever believe in reverse splits in small samples.
Never. No. But he's young enough, and I think the payoff could be big enough where why wouldn't you? He'll turn 24 in May. Popped 27 homers last year with a 328 OBP overall. I know the glove isn't good, but how do you not push more playing time in the direction of Nolan Gorman?
I think the team context has changed. And I think that's going to be big because, you don't believe in reverse platoon splits, but you can look at it and be like, well, he wasn't terrible, so let's at least run him out there for a season and see what's happening. And I think the team context has changed is that Tyler O'Neill is gone. And it's just one player, but what it does is it makes DH kind of open. Kind of last year they had 4 starting level first outfielders, and they were trying to just put one at DH all the time. Now I would say that Brendan Donovan is my legit utility player. He's the guy who gives somebody a day off everywhere. I don't know that I need to play Brendan Donovan every day, although 118 WRC plus and projected for that is good. You can put him at second for the glove and Gorman as the de facto DH, but not do it every day like that so that you're not giving up on Gorman's glove. You know what I mean? Right. So in your head, you say Gorman is the DH, Don is the second baseman. With the way it works out is Gorman plays some second base, Donovan plays some outfield, Donovan plays, I guess that's it. Some corner outfield and some DH and some second base, and Gorman plays some there. And you're not really hurting anybody. The only person that you're hurting is Alec Burleson, who could still be a candidate for a trade. And if he's just a traditional fourth outfielder, that's fine too.
Just a guy, and saw a news update that he lost some weight trying to become a more reliable defender, which gives him a better chance sticking around as a fourth outfielder. But in the first run as kind of a part of their plan, even as a semi-regular, it was still a below average bat. Mm-hmm. I just think if you're the Cardinals,
really, really poor defense that is backed up by people who watch them more often than I do.
Yeah, if you aren't prioritizing Nolan Gorman over Burleson this year, you've completely lost it. I think they'll get it right. Last season, here's what they did at DH last season. Wilson Contreras for 30 starts, Gorman for 27, Goldschmidt for 21, Burleson for 20, Donovan for 16, Lucan Baker for 16, Arenado for 15, 7 each for Yepez and Jordan Walker, and 2 for Lars Nootbaar.
So some of those guys are gone. You can even just take all those DH starts that from the guys who are gone and just stick them on Gorman.
Right. And Gorman played 67 games, started 67 games at second base too. It was the most of anybody they had.
I think you can give Gorman 550, 600 at least. The projections are light on that. 491.
Yeah. I would take the over because he was very close to doing it last year and showed enough. I mean, improved on chasing, hit the ball even harder. There's so much to like in that profile. And I think late power in the middle infield, it's not something that's easy to find. There's a few other guys that offer some similar skills, but they might not have as much of a path to the role that I think Gorman has now that things are slightly easier on that depth chart.
To give you the steamer guys that are around $10 like Nolan Gorman and available late, which is another part of why I might wait on second base, is this kind of group. The grouping of late picks that are sort of $8 to $10. Brandon Drury is in it. And I think he's kind of like an older Nolan Gorman. We've talked about Luis Rengifo. He's again in it. Brandon Lowe is pretty close. Jorge Polanco, who has a 270-ish ADP, has a $10, $11 projection even. Jeff McNeil is almost going into 300s, has a $12 projection. And then there's a guy at 350, Brendan Rodgers, who has a $6 projection. I mean, there's differences between these guys, 100%, but they are all valuable players. They're all, and if you're looking for an MI, like this is a great place to look, I think. And you can pick your favorite, but you can pick them at 250. So like, I think this is a decent place to go shopping.
Yeah, I like this group a lot. I think Polanco just jumps off the page to me as someone that's going way too late. Maybe that ADP can jump 50 plus spots between now and March, and he won't be quite the same bargain, but I think you could do that, and I'd still like him compared to this group because I think he can play more. I think it's just a health question for him.
Right. I think it's an F health grade where the projections give him 600 plate appearances, and he's put together 780 over the last two combined.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm willing to take a shot on that. At least he'll be good when he's in. And I don't think he'll be platooned a lot or like rested a lot when he's in. They can't afford to do that if they're also trying to do the same for Buxton, and some other places. So I think he'll play every day when he's in. And then when he's injured, you're just going to have to either you have a nice IL spot for him or you're just going to have to make some difficult decisions.
So I think Polanco plays a ton. He's shown this power for 3 years, and as long as he's healthy, he's out there. And I think the situation with Minnesota, it's probably a question of who's going to play a lot of first base. Alex Kirilloff has been dealing with so many injuries. It's hard to rely on him at this point. So maybe Edouard Julien plays there. Maybe he DHs because they're actually going to play Buxton in center field again.
Julian's going ahead of Polanco, and that doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me because I think Polanco has safer week-to-week playing time. Julien, though, has a strange
Julien
profile.
has options, man, and he strikes out a ton. And
yeah, but against righties last year, he was about 50% better than league average. They can't afford to take a guy like that and send him back down. They have to make the pieces fit, or injuries will simply just make it obvious. Between Buxton and Kirilloff, it might just solve itself. Like that could be part of what happens. Julien has a 17.2% O swing percentage. Really low, really good, doesn't chase. And somehow struck out more than 30% of the time. And I don't think I've ever seen that before. I don't think I've seen under 20 on O swing, over 30 on K percentage. It's a very odd combination.
I think the key here is to bring back in zone percentage. And what you see with him is he's just really, really patient. So what happens is if you swing as he does at 59% of the strikes you see, called strikes.
Yeah, you just get beat by called strikes.
And so you've got another player that's a little bit like that in Jonathan India, who has a 19% O swing, but swings at 55% of the pitches he sees in the zone. So I guess there's a little bit of a comp for you, but I guess India must have just a little bit better of a hit tool because he manages to turn out 21% strikeout rates. So he's not quite the exact same thing. Maybe this is an argument that Julian's strikeout rate's going to improve a little bit next year.
I think it could. I do think the hit tool questions are real. We see it in the FanGraphs scouting report, 35 with a future 40. But an eye that's pretty discerning and legitimate power, as we can see in that barrel rate. It's kind of a question of where exactly you fit him in defensively to get that playing time. Who do you think gets more playing time?
Oppo barrels too, so it may not be 25. It may not be 25, 30 homers. Those are Oppo barrels. Something
interesting. Interesting. That's been Oppo barrels so far. Who plays more between India and Julien? Given the crowding.
That's a good one because they go right near each other too.
Yeah.
Okay, so India is going to be battling for playing time with McLean and Encarnacion. I think, God, could Julien play more? Because the Reds have Noelvi Marte, Matt McLean, Heimer Candelario, Christian Encarnacion Strand, and Spencer Steer that all play India's positions.
Right. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that can play more than one spot. So I guess
maybe India, if you hear that India is playing, center or right, I think that you could maybe beat some Will Benson and TJ Friedel out a little bit for time, but that's not easy either.
Is there a world in which they send Noelvi Marte back to AAA to start the season?
Yes.
So I guess that's the other key, because that unlocks an infield spot that you could give that to Marte, and you're not
really
wrong.
Good debut though, too. And what if he's hitting well in spring? You say, "Thanks, kid."
Yeah. Good problem to have. That's why when they added Candelario, I just thought you didn't have to do that. It makes you a little better, but you really didn't need to do that. It's a lot of Spencer Steer in the outfield. That's part of how this works. Regardless,
bought Seth Lugo. Wasn't it like the same contract as Seth Lugo?
You really wanted everyone to sign Seth Lugo.
But they need pitching.
I wish I had the means to send you 30 Seth Lugo jerseys, just one for every single team.
I didn't get him in this draft that we're doing, so I won't have 100% shares of Seth Lugo.
That's kind of amazing. I think I would take India for a little more playing time. I don't think we're going to see Julien play against lefties, so that hurts right off the top. And then the crowding could be a factor because of his defensive limitations. And I'm not sure about Buxton in center field again, because that is a big question that opens up DH or doesn't open up DH based on whether or not it works.
Yes, is true. But also this team, if Buxton is like Willie Castro is the everyday center fielder, then your outfield is going to be Willie Castro, Matt Wallner, Max Kepler, and Trevor Larnach. Where does that rank among outfields?
And I wonder if they'd play Nick Gordon in center over Willie Castro. It'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. I think he wasn't released.
Still there. He was hurt last year. He got hurt in like May. So Max Kepler still there, man. Like it's just
taken.
It's
that's why I guess. I mean, that's maybe Julien is a little bit why we're hearing Max Kepler rumors.
I guess
maybe you could play some Julien at DH and Buxton in a corner, or Julien in a corner. It's a little bit of a weird depth chart every year with the Twins, I feel like.
Yeah. In some light, I look at it, I'm like, this is pretty good. And then some days I look at it, I'm like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I'd solve it. I'm glad I don't have to solve that particular problem, because I don't know if I have the answer.
Players, and they throw them at the wall, it seems like a little bit.
Yeah, I like India, though, relative to price. I think the Drury comments he made before, I mean, the contact quality metrics are still good. He's probably going to stick close to everyday playing time. And I think we talked about Luis Rengifo yesterday. If they were to add JD Martinez or some other infielder to the mix,
some of that would make it a little bit harder to like Drury and Rengifo. Like any additions on the Angels lineup.
Yeah,
because right now the DH being open and second base being open is why those two will get a lot of time.
Oh, and the always uncertain health status of Anthony Rendon, also a great unknown here, as we're still, almost a month ahead of spring training. Brandon Lowe goes in this group. I think the back might finally be healthy just based on the contact quality. I mean, the underlying power numbers are still encouraging. Just wonder if he missed his only chance to play a lot against lefties. He struck out 34% of the time when he played more against them in 2021. We know they mix and match. They've got a lot of flexibility on the roster, so that would be kind of my one other concern with Lowe, aside from the long-term nature of a back injury. Like that's always going to be there.
Yeah, I think that he's great in daily leagues and probably undervalued in daily leagues, where you can sit him against lefties and then start him and get 25, 30 homers with some steals. But in weekly leagues, you just lose a little bit. Like, he's never had 100 runs or RBI, even in his best season in 2021, it was 97 and 99. And 615 plate appearances with 149 games, he was still being platooned in his best season. So I would assume the same thing will happen, in its age 29 season, especially when you've got Junior Caminero, righty, Curtis Mead, righty, and Jonathan Aranda, lefty, but among the group that will mix and match on that infield.
Yeah, always crowded in Tampa Bay. Gavin Lux made it on this episode because he's second base and outfield eligible, but he's going to be a shortstop predominantly this year because Mookie is playing second, and they've added to that outfield. One of the many players coming off of a torn ACL, and I think I think I drafted 3 guys that tore their ACL last year between Edwin Diaz, Rhys Hoskins, and Gavin Lux. So I guess I have a lot of confidence in healthy ACLs coming off of surgery. But
at least
why
it isn't basketball.
Right. Well, so the thing I like about Gavin Lux is that he showed 89th percentile sprint speed before the injury. We don't know if it comes all the way back. Totally fair question.
But
we
even
didn't get a chance to see
70th or something, like he can still steal bases on that.
And we didn't see what he could do in this new stolen base environment. So I think compared to what I thought he was going to be coming out of AAA a few years ago, maybe the player he is very different, but I still think he could be a good player. And I wonder, though, like, is he really their guy at shortstop? And does that mean...
It doesn't feel like it. Like, we've heard them linked to Willy Adames. We've heard them linked to other players, and I don't know. It seems like a weird thing to just go in with this behemoth of a team and then a guy coming off ACL surgery and like a 45-year-old at shortstop.
You talk about Miguel Rojas.
Yes. I know he's not even close to 45, but he strikes me as a 45-year-old.
Miguel Rojas is definitely younger than both of us. So
yeah, right.
I'd say that with some confidence.
Let me make my jokes.
Well, maybe it's a platoon.
I'm an old man.
It's probably a platoon, because if you think about the spots they could platoon, right field, Jason Hayward's going to share with Manny Margot, presumably. Lux shares with Rojas, but they're not mixing and matching at DH because that's Shohei, and then they're not mixing and matching with Betts because he's Mookie.
But what about Muncy?
Muncy would be the third spot. So if you build the bench,
Taylor.
So yeah, if you build it the way Roster Resource has it, Barnes is the backup catcher, Taylor's the infield outfield, Rojas is the backup shortstop, and Margot is the other outfielder. So that
Margot
means
and Hayward are in a platoon. Muncy and Taylor are in a platoon.
So one of Muncy or Lux could theoretically play against lefties if they want to also give James Outman days off and play a righty in those spots. Because he's the guy, he's not flagged as a platoon, but he'd be the other one I'd say, well, maybe they're not going to play him every day. But,
the shortstop is such he's the quarterback of the infield. I mean, he's literally, making sounds. I think Addison Russell told me, like, he would make sounds at the third baseman and second baseman to let them know that an offseed was coming. He's the one who's like, he's sort of directing traffic around second base. And, I think it'd be a little bit weird too, for Gavin Lux, who hasn't really had that chance, that full everyday, go and get him, kid, chance. And he's 26, to be like, I guess the way you'd sell it is, hey, you're coming off of ACL. We want to give you a couple of days rest a week anyway to keep the legs strong. And so we'll just do those against lefties and Miguel will step in for you.
Right. I mean, look at what he's done so far. Trey Turner was there for part of this time. A lot more playing time at second than at short for Lux in his big league career to this point. So it's a question. He might be their first guy off the bench, but the big side platoon guy that plays extra, it might be a 450, 500 plate appearance max. So maybe I'll end up getting completely burned. But I thought the eligibility, the fact that he'll be second, short, and outfield, especially for a draft and hold, I actually like that quite a bit because I think the per start numbers could be pretty good. And I'm looking for a little more speed, even though he's coming off of that ACL tear. Jeff McNeil goes in this group too, kind of Luis Arraez 2.0 now that we know that the 23 homer season.
Cheap. I just prefer it because it's so much cheaper. Yeah. And also you're buying him off of a little bit of a low point batting average wise. So maybe there's some whispers that like he was hurt by the shift restrictions because he used to get shifted as a pull guy, and he's actually a spray guy. I don't know that teams would shift a guy with a 34% and 35% pull rate a ton, so I don't know if that's necessarily true. Teams have like pretty good advanced scouting, like to be like, oh yeah, they didn't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I would assume that with a 321 career BABIP for Jeff McNeil and a 288 last year, that we're going to see those move towards each other, and we're going to get like a 290 batting average, maybe 300 out of him. 10 homers, 10 stolen bases. Like, it is a weird fit, but he's also dual eligible for the draft and hold guys, second and outfield. He was one of my dual eligibility strategy guys that I picked up, and he's just glue. He's going to keep your batting average high and keep everything moving along. So I think McNeil is a great MI and a great draft and hold player.
Yeah, kind of like choosing him or Brendan Donovan. Maybe Lux fits into this group too.
But McNeil is more like, I think they're just going to play him every day.
Right. There's probably more volume coming from him. 648 plate appearances last year. You'd project more based on what we know today. And maybe things could change between now and opening day that would lead us to be more confident about Lux. But I was just thinking there could be more 5x5 value from Jeff McNeil, which would be disappointing for me as someone who's been a long-term believer.
Not for me.
Yeah, you've just moved on already. Going to the late part of this position, huge.
Showed my leg a little bit with Brendan Rodgers. I think that's a nice one.
Yeah, Rodgers should play a lot in Colorado. They don't let him run, so you know that going in. Average should be decent. I think some of the names on this list, it includes Jordan Westberg, Bryce Terang. We talked about Jose Caballero yesterday. Jake Cronenworth will be part of the first base episode. Michael Massey is going in here. Luis Urias getting a fresh start in Seattle. Luis Garcia. Miguel Vargas, another Dodger that doesn't look like he has a spot right now, but people liked him a lot going into last season. Yeah, maybe he's part of a trade. That could easily be something we see. I mean, playing time for him somewhere could open up some interesting possibilities. Got Josh Rojas in here. Mauricio Dubon, another middle outfield guy. That's kind of a nice glue player to have. I wonder if they're going to play him anywhere near as much in a season where Altuve is healthier. That's sort of the Dubon question that I have. But Bryce Terang, I like him because he's a great defender. So I think he can play a lot. I don't know if they're going to play him against lefties very much. That's always going to be a concern. And I'm really not sure there's going to be a lot more power there. We saw a 2.9% barrel rate, 26% hard hit rate during his first run against big league pitching. So it's an all glove profile for now. You do get cheap bags. He was 26 for 30 as a base stealer. So I think that's something to build on. Do you just see enough there to think that maybe he could be a passable bat with more experience?
Is this another one of your Ha-Seong game types?
This is a level below. Like this is there's more risk in this profile.
Yeah, for sure. Especially also because the Brewers did have great defense, but they also had poor offense. And you wonder, as people matriculate, how will that balance be met? Will they find that they need to play a Monasterio or Black over Terang and make Terang more of a defensive backup because they need that offense, or will they find that with Jackson Churio up and maybe some advancement from some of their outfielders that they have the offense and they just keep that defense there. So I think that's an intriguing one. But there's, obviously massive playing time issues when you get down here. Mm-hmm. Like Jordan Westberg as a player, I'd like generally. I wish he hit the ball a little bit harder, but just in terms of he seems like a player who does everything pretty well. And I would bet on him if he was traded, and I would bet on him if he was given an all-time role. I just don't think he has that. And he's going a little bit more expensive than some of the other guys. Michael Massey is somebody I like because we've saw some improvement in his swing and miss and his strikeout rate. And he's kept his max EV. He's kept his max EV high. And so there's a world in which Michael Massey, the 25-year-old, puts together his short sample barrel rate from 2022 with this nice strikeout rate from 2023 and has a breakout season. And to some extent, projections are projecting that. They're saying 21% strikeout rate, 161 ISO, 15 homers. The one problem is he looks like all the power disappears against lefties. And I don't want to read too much into a small split, but I don't know if they'll play him against lefties at all.
Yeah, I mean, they sought out Garrett Hampson this winter. So you'd think maybe the lefties playing second base would be a spot for Hampson to get a little bit of run. I do think Massey's interesting.
It's like, will it actually be Hampson playing first base? Or no,
they're not doing that.
Okay,
They got to be kidding about that, right?
No. Yeah, I saw something about that online, and I think
No,
maybe
they're not doing that. No.
But
no.
I guess Hampson's going to steal from him. So again, another daily league guy that a little bit harder to trust in weeklies. I think Rogers, I think he's going to play. I think actually he's the one guy that weekly wise I trust to play every time he's healthy. I don't think that there's a split reason to keep him out of the lineup for the Rockies. For fantasy players, the home and away splits for his career, the away split is 233, 283, 371. It's not necessarily somebody you want to play. So if you do have Rogers in a weekly league, it'd be better if you had the ability to rest him and put him on the bench sometimes.
Yeah, I like players like that more with the 50-round format than I do in the typical 7-man bench 30-round leagues that we often draft. So
yeah, because if you're like, oh, I'll piece together an MI with Rogers and Massey, that's 2 roster spots. When you only have 7 bench, what's your upside on that situation? And how many weeks are you going to be like, ooh, Massey has, 3 lefties and Rogers is away from home.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. I keep looking at the Westberg situation. I'm a little more optimistic than you are. I think you can invest here very easily, and you could come away with a lot of playing time, because when I look at their depth chart, Ramon Urias is a great utility guy. He's good glove. I think you could play him a couple times a week. So you should make Westberg your starter.
Westberg second.
I want to give Westberg second the same way I just want to move Jackson Holiday to the starting shortstop role like right now.
You just want to be like Gunnar, Jackson, Westberg, let's go.
Well, all 3 of them, yes. Play, and you got Adley behind the plate. Like, just let it happen.
Yeah.
Just let it happen. There's no reason not to.
107 WRC plus projection for Westberg. And to my point about like doing everything well, nothing's like really elite. He'll have around a league average strikeout rate, around a league average walk rate, around a league average barrel rate, a little bit better than that, league average max hit, a little bit better than league average hard hit. So this is a guy who should have a safe batting average. If you can, what it could be is, take him on your bench in a situation where you're drafting in early March, and then know that you may have to drop him if the team doesn't listen to you.
Yeah. I mean, there's a chance it doesn't work out immediately, and you can't just hold for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it takes for them to come around and give them the chance. But the hard hit numbers at AAA, Fangraphs had him at a 51% hard hit rate at AAA with a pretty low K rate. He's walked everywhere he's played. This guy just looks like he's got it kind of figured out. Does everything well, like you said. If you said Jordan Westberg is going to be discussed the same way Matt McLean is being talked about this draft season,
that could be possible.
I could see that. Like, the tools are all there. So
the steals is, I think, an open question mark, especially as people enter this new environment. I mean, he stole 4 in 228 plate appearances in the major leagues, 6 and 300 in the minor leagues. So, that could go either way. I mean, that could be 15 or that could be 5 next year. I don't really have an answer for projecting that, but I would guess on the higher end, just because he's a young guy that can still run.
Did I draft Gavin Lux over Jordan Westberg? Did I do that?
I think so.
I shouldn't have done that.
Do we have any love for Davis Schneider?
Someone's got to play in that infield. I mean, I don't know what maybe are they bringing back Whit Merrifield or something? What are the Blue Jays
seem like they have powder left, and they may make a move. So, but I just love 176 WRC plus. I know it's a small sample, but he is projected to be above the league average, and he's a barrel rate connoisseur. I mean, he's this guy with the 50% pull rate and the 50% fly ball rate. I even watched him, and I was like, I feel like I can see you trying to hit the ball to the pull power alley.
So he's right-handed Kevin Biggio.
Yeah, or like a Bregman-esque. He's definitely trying to just pull that thing right into space. I guess he doesn't swing much, but he's a little bit more aggressive in the zone than Kevin Biggio. And maybe that's just it. Maybe they're like, hey, we can get the platoon advantage. We'll put Schneider in against every lefty. Do they like Kevin Biggio?
I don't know. I've never felt like they've liked him that much.
Yeah.
But he's still there. So
300 plate appearances every year is just like the weirdest level of like, he's okay.
Do you remember when he debuted? It was 100 games. It was like 2/3 of a season. Good OBP, low average. And he hit 16 homers and he stole 14 bases. And he was perfect 14 for 14. And it was just like, oh, well, hey, another son of a big leaguer in this court. This is going to happen. They're going to do this too. And nothing he's really been able to do since then has come close. He's never had as many plate appearances in any follow-up season as he had in 2019. The closest he would have really come on a per game, like how many shares of playing time did he get, was the shortened season in 2020. And he actually wasn't bad in the shortened season. But the last 3 seasons, I don't know. It just looks like a clear part-time sort of guy that doesn't have that much to offer. And I remember back in 19, we talked about it. The underlying numbers weren't good, right? It wasn't a case where he was crushing the ball or anything like that. It was like a high sweet spot percentage play. It's all it was. It wasn't barrels. It wasn't hard hit rate.
Yeah,
it was just putting the ball in the right angle a lot, and it just happened to work out.
That was his highest fly ball rate. So he was pulling fly balls. It was a little bit like the Schneider approach, but ever since that day, his fly ball rate has dropped, and his pull rate has dropped. Really.
Yeah, Davis Schneider did come out of like relative nowhere to do what he did at AAA, and then his brief debut last year. He's okay.
I think Schneider is what they hoped Biggio would be, and he hasn't been.
Yeah, that could be. Anybody else on this corner? I mean, Josh Rojas seemed a little more interesting in Seattle, but that depth chart concerns me.
Yeah. I mean, it concerns me too, but just because it's got not great places. So I guess Dylan Moore fights Rojas for playing time.
I think Rojas and Urias cover one spot and they add somebody else. Maybe they're the team that goes in. Well, they're not spending. They're just not spending. So it's probably some goofy trade. Can we get a goofy trade?
They've got one more goofy trade in them for sure.
That's what it seems like, doesn't it?
It really does. We liked Jordan Diaz, we mentioned.
Yeah, Diaz is solid. He's going to play a lot for Oakland, so good deep league player. I don't know if he's ever going to do enough to be like a 12-team mixed league kind of player, but a lot of space between AL onlys and 12-teamers where you can find him.
Some improvement left in a strikeout rate, but yeah, the glove I can confirm with the eyes is not good. Adam Frazier,
still again Adam Frazier.
Yeah, I mean he's a free agent.
Super
you have
cheap.
to identify where he goes. Maybe he ends up in Seattle again.
No, don't do that again.
I don't know. I think some of the rules were good for him, and I think he could have a year with a much better BABIP. Yeah, what am I expecting? Even if he gets 2/3 playing time, I think 260, 10-10. Again, that's not super exciting.
How about another Cardinal? Thomas Sujasi is the pronunciation. I just saw that coming out of whatever the Cardinals Fan Fest is.
That's how you say that?
Sujasi. Yep, Sujasi.
Saggese.
Sujasi. So yeah, good luck finding that if you haven't seen it. It looks like Sagis or something along those lines. So
I'm glad you went first. I mean, I really like what he's done in the minor leagues. Although the AAA was a small sample, we didn't get great hard hit numbers, but there was, it was a really small sample, and he also hit 55% ground balls in AAA, which he'd never done before. Otherwise, you've got a guy who makes contact, puts the ball in the air, has hit for power, has run for speed, and has a 40-45 fielding number, which is always interesting in St. Louis. I just think he's pretty blocked for now. Maybe he ends up in a trade, or I don't, with Gorman and Donovan ahead of him, and maybe even Edmund, I don't see where he gets playing time this year.
Yeah, I think it's more of a late season promotion. I think we'll see
If they're
more of
bad?
CJC in 2025. No, I just think if injuries, different things pile up, and you bring a guy
Run me-
like that up later in the year. But let him play AAA half a season before you really have to try and force the issue.
Run me through the Milwaukee depth chart real quick again. So you think it's Urias and no, that's wrong.
The Seattle
It's
depth
not
chart.
Milwaukee anymore. Yeah, no. Run me through Milwaukee because I want to know about Tyler Black.
All right, Tyler Black's going to play third base. He's a lefty. Monasterio's a righty. Owen Miller's a righty. Tyler Black plays third base when he comes up. He's an OBP machine. He's got other tools, of course. There's a lot to like.
He's better than Monasterio and Miller right now.
Has to be. Just has to be. There's only 39 games at AAA last year, so it doesn't necessarily have to be opening day. But if you look at this lineup and you want to be better than you were a year ago, you can put all that on Jackson Chourio, and that's not fair. They might do that. I don't think it's fair. I think when you look at guys like Turang, Mitchell, you have a lot of questions. Monasterio's part of that too. How many spots in your lineup can you do that? Sal Frelick?
I think this is a classic case where if Tyler Black has a good spring, he just takes the job.
I think he could. I think he hit his way onto the roster, and if he doesn't, it's probably not going to take him that long to break through because they're going to need a bat, and I think he could be maybe a guy that ends up in the leadoff spot.
Yeah, like if you're playing Turang at second, I have some hope for one of the Milwaukee corner outfielders to step forward, but as they are right now, Frelick, Weimer, Mitchell, and Perkins are all, I don't want to say like full zeros, but like below average bats, right?
Oh, hey, the good news is you have a whole week to think more about that situation.
But if you're running Turang and Frelick out there, and then Bowers is your first baseman, I feel like they're looking for offense.
Mm-hmm. They need it.
Why they even signed Bowers in the first place.
Tyler Black, man, I think it's gonna be a good situation for him. He's third base eligible, so not part of the second base crowd here at the bottom. I want to see. No, it's okay. We were just talking about Turang a little earlier, and what are they going to do? Like
Jay Jones, Jemai
Jones.
Whoa, the old Angels prospect.
Yeah, I think he'd end up more in a small side platoon if he sticks around on the roster. So I don't see a ton there.
It's not good.
No, unfortunately for him, it really isn't. Not a lot of prospects at second base. We've talked about that before. Jace Young, younger brother of Josh Young, would be the exception. I think it's kind of a question of how quickly do the Tigers want to start bringing some guys up. Colt Keith's going to get up first, I would assume,
and he might play second. So even though he doesn't have eligibilities, he is worth talking about. He's a really exciting prospect.
Yeah.
So if you can have the ability to wait for him to get second base eligibility on your bench or something, then definitely think about rostering Colt Keith. He'd be an interesting guy to put on a bench and wait for. I think he does everything pretty well. There's no real flaw in the approach, I don't think.
The Tigers are getting there. We talked about their pitching a few episodes ago. There's a couple more interesting young bats on the way, and they're not that far off. And given that it's the AL Central, you could see some pretty big improvement pretty quickly from this roster.
Yeah, second base is where you stick a guy who used to be the shortstop, or maybe he's a first baseman who has a little bit better glove, or it's really, it's not a place you traditionally have second base prospects. And even look at the top of this list: Gleyber Torres, former shortstop; Ha-Seong Kim, Matt McLean, former shortstop; Nico Horno, former shortstop; Marcus Semien, former shortstop; Mookie Betts, former right fielder. It's the catch-all spot. For some reason, it seems to get undervalued in drafts, and I have like 5 maybe second basemen in our draft, just because like people don't think about them. I think, but. It's an interesting position, and I just wouldn't go prospect hunting there.
I think the other part of second base is that you end up with depth guys that show up there in season because they tend to trust more players to just fill in there. So a lot of the multi-eligible players pick up second base or have second base going in there, even if it's not their primary spot. So then you end up with a couple guys in the roster that you can shuffle in and out of that spot. So a decent position, though, better than it used to be, and a lot of different ways to play it. We kind of broke down how we like to go. That mid-tier especially looks pretty good. You get a nice balance of some power with good speed on a lot of those players. You don't necessarily have to pay up at the very top. And as you move further and further down the board, Jordan Westburg, not completely cheap, but really a guy that I like late that could do a ton of good things for you at a very modest price. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic. It's $2 a month for the first year at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Our position preview series rolls on. We're going to move to the corner infield for the next couple of episodes. If you didn't catch shortstops yet, go back and listen to that. And as I said at the top of the show, be sure to like this video if you watched on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, and also take a moment to leave us a nice rating and review if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening.